This is sort of an example of how programming works and memory wipes and reprogramming, or if you will, a much larger subject, which is called assimilation. Being similar. Similar patterns, behavioral algorithms, right? Dynamically linked libraries of programmed. Get your programs here. What we program in using minus/plus, minus plus, put it in memory and run it. Run that program, right? Which is called a task modality using your state of consciousness, right? Memory minus, remove it, right? And then we get into firewalls, which is called filtering content, filtering program, filtering alphanumerical formatting codes, what we experience in the mirror, the TV screen, that others experience through us, and we experience through them, through that biocomputer communication on a motherboard. So I'm watching a movie here with old Fred McMurray that I guess was made in the 40s called Old New York. And so this was folks that were living during that period of time, right? About the way that their behavioral algorithms, which is based on sound and light patterns, of how they communicate with each other, in this case, using the English language, the alphabet soup of sound and light. So when I was watching this actor, Fred McMurray, being funny in the way that they were communicating in English back and forth between another lady who was a proprietor of a waterfront little hotel, right? And Richard Green, who played what? Remember him? Robin Hood. Came in all Dapper Dan, right? With nice flowery shirts, right? And a cape that represented what we learned through programming is somebody of class, distinction, by virtue of what? Accumulating more electrons. So I can remember, because I saw this, where as the lady was getting ready to show the man a room, right? She opened the door, and guess what Mr. Green said? Ladies first, right? Now, I remember that, okay? Now, as you may or may not know, the native tribes honor the matriarch, the birth giver, the female mitochondria, the first mother of that genetic line, right, of software development. And so when I think about the things that I learned through my biological mothers and fathers, I remembered how my mother, for example, was very strict. She had gone to school to be programmed, to put into her memory, which is load the program, right? And then she shared with me, and much of this is sort of like in the way that we understand mimicking or programming or model, right? What others model, and thus load it into our memory and then run it. So in this case, for example, my mother was very well polished as those words are applied to programming because my mother's adopted parents sent her to a very expensive elite school, which back in the day, which would have been in the early 1920s and early 30s, called finishing school. Because when you're hosting, and you know what hosting, like a host vessel, right? The crystal host, crystal spiral host, the crystal river host, right? My mother had very, very polished manners that she made sure that I followed, right? About having honor, love, respect, courtesy, consideration towards others, right? So that was sort of a way when a lady was present, you open the door for her, right? And I began to realize that, yeah, when I was a little kid, I was doing that with girls, always opening doors for girls, ladies first, right? And that was considered what we call a way to honor the female, the flower, right? We honor you because I came out of a girl. Thank you for bringing me into the realm, right? So that's a way to honor the girl. So like when I was growing up, for example, and I remember this because here was another part of how this programming works, but it was an honor to be able to do that. because there's something deeply spiritual about what we feel inside of our heart and soul by how much love we have, particularly when you're one with all creation that we're gifting love to. When you perceive it through the chromosome side between, if you will, the two poles, between the negative and the positive magnetic polarity, or if you will, the male and the female become one blast furnace, eternal spirit of fire, right? So I thought that was a great way to honor the female side, right? Because I always felt deeply sensitive for flowers. Flowers are like precious. You don't want to ruffle one petal. So they're experiencing being nurtured, feeling nurtured, that touchy-feely sort of, whoa, the true love innocence of a child's heart and soul. The purity of that love, which is the innocence of knowing that there's nothing held in memory that represents trauma to experience one electron that's being held captive as a result of not letting go out of fear of losing energy. Because they want to hold on to that energy to protect themselves out of what's held in memory of something present that's feeding on their star. That's right. That's how it works. So you know when you come into something that's feeding on your electrons, that's a fallen state, right? That's a fallen state of consciousness, chasing that hamster wheel. I know. And so some of these movies that I watch from time to time, there's another reason why I do that. You'd be surprised there are a lot of different ways to collapse fake timelines that are running through your consciousness. When you got a connection to an eternal sun, to collapse those timelines at a very high rate of speed. Right? That's why it's no coincidence why I happen to use my consciousness to run certain programs with my consciousness that I'm running in particular dates and times that are held in memory in this system. Run those codes. Run that geometry. Run those burn patterns of sound and light. Have a good evening. I love you all. Be good to yourselves. Kamaloati. Mua. Mua mama.